We pray for the children
told me at one point that I was adopted. They told me that my family was dead. They told me that I was Cree. I was a Cree Indian.
Find their shoes. And we pray for those who stare at photographers from behind barbed wire, who can't bound down the street. My mother had her children taken away, basically because she was too poor, who are born in places deemed too poor to look after them, who never go to the circus, who live in an X-rated world. We pray for the children who bring us sticky kisses and fistfuls of dandelions, who hug us in a hurry and forget.
They told me that I should be glad that they took me away from Indian people because they're nothing but drunks and they can't help themselves.
Who watch their parents watch them die, who can't find any bread to steal, who don't have any rooms to clean up, whose pictures aren't on anybody's dresser, whose monsters are real.
I believe I probably have the life histories of about 400 children in my head and in my heart.
Throw tantrums in the grocery store
And
pick up their food.
it's always distressed me that a lot of our kids have moved from placement to
Dirty clothes
placement.
under the bed, who never rinse out the tub, who gets visits from the tooth fairy, who don't like to be kissed in front of the carpool, who squirm in church or temple and scream in the phone, whose tears we sometimes laugh at and whose smiles can make us cry. And we pray for those whose nightmares come in the daytime, who will eat anything.
A lot of them are still out there. A lot of them were taken
seen
away
a
from the
dentist,
earth and they never came
who
back.
aren't spoiled by anybody, who go to bed hungry and cry themselves to sleep, who live and move but have no being.
It was almost one of the unwritten rules, I guess, in our society that you took kids and you raised them as your own.
And for those who don't get a second chance, for those we smother, and for those who will grab the hand of anybody kind enough to offer it.
You're a foster child or not, you're still a human being and you have a right to belong like anybody else.
Hi, I'm Bev Jackson. To the First Nations people of Canada, the issue of adoption has often been a bitter one. So prevalent in the backlash of residential school systems, poverty, and abuse, historians have labeled the apprehension of First Nation children in the 1960s as the 60s scoop. Policies that closed files and kept secret by law the adoption, distribution of First Nations children to peoples and places unknown, across the continent and around the world. There are many stories in most of our communities of the taken away ones. Today, we have the personal stories of two exceptional individuals and the pilot project that may change the face of adoption for Canada's First People. Janine Carrier is a Métis from the Red River area of Manitoba, the youngest of 12 siblings whose persistence and patience overcame barriers of secrecy and non-contact.
My adoption went through when I was 6 months old. My mother had 16 siblings. They all had large families. It was really hard for them to keep taking the kids and bringing them back, and which I understand is what happened a lot. So finally my aunt went to the RCMP and said, my sister has all these kids and she needs help. So the RCMP, of course, went to Children's Aid, and that was the end of that. They just came and scooped everybody off. The older ones, some of them were gone already, and my sister Jean was 16, so she had to go to work. She ended up working in a home in the same town where I was. She started listening to these people talking about this adopted baby, and she put two and two together and realized this baby was her sister. So she came to the house and asked my parents if she could visit with me. And they didn't know what to do, so they said sure. They went to the barn or something to give her some privacy, and she kidnapped me. Her idea was that she was going to take me back to my mother. So she took off down the highway with me, and Eventually the RCMP caught up to her and brought me back to my adopted family.
Orlando Alexis is a member of the Alexis First Nation. His life journey took him far from his home and the knowledge of his people.
I was born here back in 1968. When my mom, after I was born, she was young, so they took me away because she was like 13. My adopted dad was a supply officer in the Navy, and he was stationed in Philadelphia. And then we ended up in Arkansas, that's where my adopted father was from. My adopted mother, for some reason or another, she would hit me, and she would get frustrated with me, and she would hit me and slap me, and she would never spank me. She would hit me, like in the arm or in the face, the head. I remember in kindergarten I got beat up, like my first or second day there. I got beat up by some kids. They called me nigger, and they called me red bastard and stuff like that. And really, I didn't understand what they were getting at or what they were saying. It never occurred to me that I was brown and they were white. I never looked at myself as a different color. And that's pretty much how it was for me growing up.
I was playing with a neighbor, and he got mad at me, and he said, "Oh, you're nothing but adopted anyway." So I, being a kid, just immediately ran to my parents and said, "Well, what is that?" He says, "I'm adopted." What is that supposed to mean? And they sort of kindly gave me an explanation about the fact that they didn't have me as their baby, but they chose me. And then, of course, I started asking questions about my birth family later on when I was a little more mature. And I was told that I had none, that they were dead. So that kind of satisfied me for a bit until I was 12. And of course, in a small town, you know everybody. You know all the cars. And this car drove into the yard, and I thought, I don't know these people, and these are strangers. And they get out of the car, and it's a young girl, a teenage girl, and I thought, wow, she's pretty. She looks familiar, but I've never met her before. So she came up to me and said, "Are you Janine?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, I'm your sister, Suzanne." I said, "My sister?" And that was the first connection I had with my birth family. And nothing was ever the same again for me. And the social worker said, "Oh no, she's too young. She can't understand this. It'll just confuse her, so don't allow the visits." So they didn't allow my sister to come back, although they never gave me an explanation. So I became very angry, very bitter. I felt that this was all my fault, that it must have been something I did or said, and that my sister didn't love me. And so I started a lot of abusive behaviors that I now recognize as self-abuse. I pulled out chunks of my hair. I mutilated myself on my arms, and started acting out in terms of drug and alcohol use, promiscuity, a lot of other behaviors that now as an adult I'm not very proud of, but I also recognize as a young girl trying to tell somebody something and they weren't listening.
I used to, believe it or not, I used to cut on myself, and that's a disease. That's people just cut. I used to do that when I was little. Like I used to cut here, and I'd cut it, just cut little spots. Just cut. I got over it. I got over cutting myself up. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I left that whole area and moved someplace else with that, that children's home. That was probably the best thing that could have ever happened to me in that situation.
Due to extreme physical abuse by his adoptive mother, Orlando was removed from the home and placed in a Baptist children's home where he graduated high school and went on to complete 2 years of college before enlisting in the United States Navy, seeing duty in Liberia in 1989 and Desert Storm in the Persian Gulf.
I was married about 6 weeks before we went overseas. We ended up getting called overseas. It was we were on standby, so we just all hopped on a ship and took off, and that was it. While I was overseas, I sent money back to my wife. I was in the Gulf. You know, we were getting tax-free money, getting this and that, getting hazardous duty pay, and we were getting really good money, and I was sending it all back to my wife. When I came back, I found out that she had spent all my money, had taken my car, taken all the furniture out of the house, all my stuff was gone, and she was 4 months pregnant. And that was pretty hard for me, because all this time I thought things were great. After that, I started drinking. I was drinking a lot. You know, in the Navy, you drink a lot. That's what they do. You know, sailors go drinking. No one really cared. I mean, you know, I guess maybe I was fitting the stereotype of the Indian, you know, drunk Indian. Go out, he's supposed to be drunk. That's how it is. You know, he drinks. No one ever said, hey, why are you drinking so much? Why don't you get some help? Not one time. Finally one day I don't know, I was just sobering up, and I was thinking about what was I doing, where was I going, was this life for me? And so I ended up going to the VA hospital. While I was there, one of the first things they asked me, they said, well, who are you? And I said, well, I'm Roger Allen Albaugh. That's who I am. And they said, well, who is that? I felt bad inside because I had no self-esteem. I had no purpose in life. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I was from. The only thing I knew, I was Indian. I was a Cree Indian. I'm not Cree, but at the time I thought I was. And I didn't know who my mom and dad were. I didn't know who my family was. The only thing I knew was that my adopted family said they were dead. And I always lived with that. My family's dead. You know, there's no going back to see my family.
The Yellowhead Tribal Services Agency delivers social programs to a coalition of 5 bands, which lie west of Edmonton and spread across to the Rockies. It has seen the successful implementation of the custom care model, developed and delivered by the YTSA staff, which places apprehended children in temporary placements within First Nation communities. Involved in social work since 1984 and as a consultant and advisor on the custom care model, Janine carries a Master of Social Work degree and is a current PhD candidate. She and the YTSA staff are now on the forefront of breaking new ground in the policies and issues surrounding adoption, which is seen as a natural extension of the custom care model. Shortcomings of long-term foster care is evident, and the need to progress to a more permanent solution is a natural next step.
The more placements they have, the more they learn that it's not okay to share your feelings, it's not okay to trust. You don't get too close to people, and you get really hard, and you close yourself off. And then you become an adult. And that doesn't just disappear because you become an adult. You carry that into your relationships with your spouse, with your children, with your relatives, with your friends. And so the damage is not from 0 to 18. It's a permanent kind of damage. You know, I guess I have views on adoption that are mixed, because I'm also an adoptive parent. but I want my son to know his birth family. I will do anything to help him connect with his birth family, because I know what my family went through, my birth family, what I went through, and in the end, you know, we struggled to find each other, and that was so important to all of us. And we're still trying to be a family today. I'm still meeting relatives today. And I don't want any other child to go through what I went through, what my brothers and sisters went through.
We need to really refocus what we're doing as a group of people and as a nation of people. And I'm not only talking about First Nation people, but I'm talking about across Canada, is that we have to start to respect one another and look at what's important for all of us to be here.
It's difficult to have children being born today and knowing that they could be in foster homes for the next 18 years. I'd like to see them have a Native family in our communities to call their own. We have quite a few kids still in placements that aren't Native, and some of them are very young. I don't know, it's difficult for me as a worker, and I hope maybe some of the talk amongst the elders would help me understand. Is it not this generation that we just leave them be the way the other generation was, or do we help these children to have homes in our communities?
I think our focus has to,
as with custom care, to be practical and culturally relevant to First Nation communities. The Adoption Project looks to the direct involvement of community elders, whose wisdom and experience keeps priorities and policies close to the heart.
She said that years ago, the caregiver took kids because they love the kids. They took them in because they don't like to see kids being out there with no home, no family to turn to. And that's what she said was, in order for people to take it, it should come from their heart, not the benefits in regards to money-wise.
I don't know everything, but the old folks, long time ago, they used to take their grandchildren or some other kids, raise them as their own, and there was no legal ties or anything, you know, just the goodness of their heart. They used to raise them up to their adults till they go on their own.
When we pick up children, we look at the necessities because we're looking at the basic needs of the child at that time, and one of those basic needs has to be their identity of who they are, where they came from, who are their family, who are their generations, who are the people that made them who they are. The blood is thicker than water kind of concept comes to mind for me.
I have very little rights in terms of access to information. I have asked many, many times, and they keep sending me my adoption papers, copies of my adoption papers. Well, I've had those for a long time. I know what's in there. I have it all memorized. But there's a lot of other detail that they won't give me because it's in a closed file that they refuse to open. And I'm 47 years old. What could be so terrible in that file that I couldn't live with if I read it? I know details about my birth father through my older siblings. I know that my mother was not married to my father. It says in my records that I was illegitimate. I'm not illegitimate. I'm a real person, and I've had a real past and a real connection to a whole lot of generations before me and to a whole lot of generations after me, God willing. So those words are still hurtful because they take away who I am. So I believe in adoption in terms of, I believe in permanence, meeting the permanency needs of children, the consistent need for love and care. I don't believe in the secrets and the lies and the destruction that causes in people's lives. And there, by the grace of God, go I, because I could have been one of those kids who return home in a coffin. very, very many times. And when I get too cocky, I go back to Winnipeg and I sit under this bridge that I lived under for a few, well, sometime during a summer when I was 16 years old. And I try and remember that I wasn't always who I am now, and that I've been very fortunate. It's been a lot of good people in my life who have helped me out and helped me to regain some belief in myself. And luckily for some of my brothers and sisters as well. But that bridge helps me to remember and helps me to connect with those other children out there who are lost, and I pray that they find their way home.
Yeah, and then a couple of years back, we got a phone call from Wisconsin, I think,
Virginia.
Oklahoma or Virginia, yeah. Someplace out there, we got a call from this Orlando, let's just say. And he said he's looking for Alexis. Because when the people that adopted them, I guess, they took him to the States, they changed his name, gave him a different name and different thing. But all of a sudden he finds out he's from here. And he came back just in time.
I've gone most of my life, 25 years,
to know his mother,
not knowing.
And his mother.
I was at a club one night. I went down with a couple friends. We were hanging out. For some reason, my wallet ended up getting lost or stolen, or I don't know what. I had to get all new identification, so I went and filled out all the forms at different various places, and I ended up going to immigration. I had to get a new green card, and I filled out the forms. I gave it to them, and then the lady said, "What's this name here?" And I said, "That's my name." And she said, "Well, according with the number you gave us, according to our records, your name is Orlando Alexis." And I said, "Well, my name's Roger Allen Albaugh." And they said, "No, it's not." I said, "Sure it is. That's the name I grew up with. I was adopted, and my family adopted me." They said, "Well, apparently they didn't change your name legally." And I thought about it, and I said, "Well, what do I have to do?" And they said, "Well, from this day forward, you cannot use this name in the United States, or it'll be grounds for deportation. And I'm giving you this green card, and this is your name, and you have to use this name, and you have to get identification with this name. You have to throw away all your old IDs and get new ones." So I did. And I was sitting at home, and I started thinking about, you know, where I was from in Canada. I knew I was from Canada somewhere. I called Ottawa, various numbers I just got from the operator, and I ended up calling this adoption hotline. And I said, "My name is Roger Allen Albaugh." And I left the country, I guess, in 71. Something like June 6th or June 8th or something. And they said, "We have no record of that." And I said, "Well, try this other name. Try Orlando Alexis." And they said, "Are you white or native?" And I said, "I'm native." They said, "Hold on." And then she said, "Yep, we have you down as leaving the country in 71. And I said, "Great. Can you give me some information about that?" And she said, "No, you have to come to Ottawa." I said, "I can't come to Ottawa. I'm in Virginia Beach." And she said, "Well, you have to come up here, sir, because we have to get statements and document. We have to document you and whatever." And I said, "Well, the only thing I want to know where I'm from." I said, "Can you tell me where I'm from?" She said, "No, sir, we can't." And I said, "Well, can you at least tell me where my paperwork originated from?" And she said, "Alberta. Looks like it might be from the Edmonton area." And I said, "Well, thank you." And then I called the operator in Alberta, and I asked for anything that had to do with Indian people in Alberta. And I was calling numbers, and "No, we've never heard of you. No. And then finally I got hold of Paul band. And they said, well, why don't you try the Alexis Reserve? And I said, the Alexis Reserve? They said, yeah, your last name's Alexis, isn't it? I said, yeah. They said, well, you might be from there. I said, okay. And so I called them, and I talked to them, and they said, well, we don't know right now. We have to look in our records, and maybe if you can call back tomorrow, we'll give you an answer. And I called them, and they said, yes, we know who you are. I said, really? They said, yes, you're on our registers. I said, well, can you tell me who my mom and dad are? And they said, we know who your mom and dad are. Your mom, we contacted her last night and told her, and she said she wanted to call you, and if you give us your number, we'll give it to her and have her call you. And I said, okay, and I gave it to him. And a little while later, my phone rang, and my mom called me. And I said, hello? Because, I mean, what do you say? You know, what do you say to your mom? What do you say to someone that you've never met? And I said, I called her mom. I said, hello, Mom. She said, hello, son. And I said, well, I was looking for you. And she said, yeah, we were looking for you too. We've been looking for you since you turned 18. And I was talking to her, and she was really happy and excited, and she wanted to know how things were, how my life turned out. And I was talking to her. I said, well, you know, I was taken away from my adopted family, and I was put in a children's home. She said, well, son, the adoption agency that we talked to, they said you were fine, that you were having a good life, and the people loved you, and they were taking better care of you than we ever could, and blah, blah, blah. And then she started crying because of all the stuff that I'd been through in my life. And I told her, I said, don't cry. I'm okay. I've dealt with the past, and I want to find my roots and find my family, and here you are. I'm talking to you on the phone, and 3 days later I flew up here.
Because we've had such a bitter and horrible experience with adoption the old way, that we could do things differently. We could look at another process where there would be no secrets.
It's one of our tribal customs. When you see a kid that has no parents, it was customary to bring these kids into your home and look after them as your own. You feed them, you clothe them, you don't get child welfare involved, you don't get social services involved.
You're a foster child or not, you're still a human being, and you have a right to belong like anybody else, and I guess that's basically what we're trying to do. We're adopting our little guy Tony because, well, first of all, we love him, and we want to keep him in our community where the rest of his family is, you know. So I think that's the difference.
Within all of our communities, First Nation communities in Alberta and I believe across Canada, we've been doing that for generations and generations. And that's part of our way of life. And it's so accepted and recognized, but it's not recognized legally.
This is probably the only adoption program, at least we know in Western Canada, that's going to be like this, and possibly the whole country. So YTSA is going to be demonstrating some leadership here, and it's very, very exciting. And my hope is that all the other First Nations look to this and say, hey, you know, why not?
I believe that all children are looking for unconditional love, and I know that as a parent, it doesn't matter what your children do, that there's this unconditional love and acceptance, and that you would be there when things were tough and when things were good. And for many of our foster children, they always walk around with that label, foster child. It doesn't matter if they're with their family. They still know that they are a foster child. And for adoption, that would give them, I believe, that sense that they do belong to that family, that they're a full part of that family.
I think it's coming down to jurisdiction. Like I know some of our leaders have been saying that, not only our leaders but our First Nation directors have been saying that we want to look after our own. Even our elders have been saying it for years. Look after our own, keep our own within our own communities.
But when I met my mom at the airport, you know, and I saw her, I just cried, and she was crying. And I realized that, you know, that was one moment in my life I'll never forget. I've never had anyone I've had to rely on. There was never anyone there that I could go to, that I could talk to, that would treat me as a son, or treat me as just another human being. I was always talked down to and treated as if I was less than everyone else. And I came back here and I saw my dad and my family, and I was so happy, and I can't explain how I felt. I came back 2 more times after the initial time, and then my mom passed away. I got a phone call one day at work, and they told me, they said, your mother passed away this afternoon. And I don't know if there's ever been a time in my life when I have felt as hurt as I did when I got that call, because she was the one thing in my life that I wanted, you know, a mother. And for her to be taken away from me, and to only spend that short amount of time together, it was really hard. It was really, really hard. I mean, I felt at that point that my life was going in the right direction. And I came here for the funeral. I think a lot of my family at that time, they thought that I would never come back because my mom passed away. But my dad's here, my brothers, my sisters, my aunts and uncles and grandmothers and grandfathers, they're all still here. I was pretty angry. I was pretty upset. But then I started thinking about what would have happened if I would have never met my mom. If I would have never met her and talked to her and told her that I loved her, and told her how much I cared about her, and told her how much that I dreamed of her holding me. And for her to tell me how much she missed me and how much she wanted me to come back. And I did. I got married. My wife was pregnant. And I called up here to the reserve. I talked to the chief. I said, I'm moving back. I want to move back. I want to help the community. I want to have my son grow up in this community and give him the things that I never had. Give him the things that I always wanted. To have a grandmother and an aunt and an uncle, and, you know, mom and dad, be around Indian people, grow up in the culture, dance if he wants, sings if he wants, all these things. I want him to have these options that I never had. I feel like that as long as I live my life and try to be a good relative to everyone, that's how I should live. I mean, the family that adopted me, they were pretty well off. They had lots of stuff. But stuff doesn't matter when you don't have love. You don't have a family that loves you. And just for those few times that I was with her, you know, that was good enough for me.
A bitter history of family separation and the departure from extended family structures and customs, we find ourselves at a turning point. To rebuild our families is to rebuild our communities. We need First Nation community members to open their hearts and their homes to the children.
We pray for the children who sneak popsicles before supper, who erase holes in math workbooks, who can never find their shoes. And we pray for those who stare at photographers from behind barbed wire, who can't bound down the street in a new pair of sneakers, who never counted potatoes, who are born in places where we couldn't be caught dead, who never go to the circus, who live in an X-rated world. We pray for the children who bring us sticky kisses and fistfuls of dandelions, who hug us in a hurry and forget their lunch money. And we pray for those who never get dessert, who have no safe blanket to drag behind them, who watch their parents watch them die, who can't find any bread to steal, who don't have any rooms to clean up, whose pictures aren't on anybody's dresser, whose monsters are real. We pray for the children who spend all their allowance before Tuesday, who throw tantrums in the grocery store and pick at their food, who like ghost stories, who shove dirty clothes under the bed, who never rinse out the tub, who gets visits from the tooth fairy, who don't like to be kissed in front of the carpool, who squirm in church or temple and scream in the phone, whose tears we sometimes laugh at and whose smiles can make us cry. And we pray for those whose nightmares come in the daytime, who will eat anything, who have never seen a dentist, who aren't spoiled by anybody, who go to bed hungry and cry themselves to sleep, who live and move but have no being. We pray for children who want to be carried and those who must, who we never give up on, and for those who don't get a second chance, for those we smother, and for those who will grab the hand of anybody kind enough to offer it.